in that case, wouldn't it be correct that if you go to a piece of art that you want to create and you use the patterns that you are aware of, and they are the patterns that people say, you know, I like to buy, or they become the in patterns.
Sure.
Then it's a very superficial level.
I agree.
And I think it's this, whether it's patterns or whether it's random, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Well, for me it doesn't matter. It might matter for you because you're perhaps not, I'm not sure what the right word is, analytical or scientific or something, but about getting that artwork back to the person who purchases it or lives with it.
What we are here tonight to discuss, and what we try to understand a little bit more, what is it? What makes it special to each of us? Why we like something, what we see, and why some people are happy to pay a lot of money for it. Has nothing to do with the value.
Briefly, because most will not be familiar, there's a lot of contemporary aesthetic research on more theory and the brain. And if you read it, there are some very good books about it. Some aspects are interesting, but when you're an art lover and it fits to the discussion now, you immediately pinpoint mistakes being made. And that happens in all specializations. Doesn't matter what we all do. We all know that when you specialize on something, you can specialize very deeply and miss the whole point because you're specializing. You're not seeing the context. And with a lot of aesthetic research in context to art, it's only done in a lab situation. Lab is not bad, like we heard. But in context to art, in a lab situation, they only look at reproductions, either on a monitor or projected. And the worst case scenario, from my perspective as an artist, is people are strapped into an MRI machine and having to look at a small screen and look at a huge Jackson Pollock, and then they look at the brain, what's happening. But the second mistake very often is made is that afterwards they ask the test person to describe their experience. And describing your experience in words, we all know, something very different from the experience itself. Yeah. And we have a very good wine importer here, I don't have to explain to him. With good wines, it's the same. When you're not a specialist in wines and somebody asks you, describe this wine, we do our best not to make a bad figure and try to describe in pseudo-professional language what we just experienced, but it's not close to how you really experience the wine. And the same is with that kind of research. So the research on art is not so easy, because we did a little experiment in the Bode Museum quite a few years ago, and we also noticed it's only a little tip of a huge iceberg, but it's a very fascinating subject. You want to say something?
Right. You said these 70 degrees in Alhambra were constrained by mathematics. Is it true? Yeah.
So the idea, I should have said it a little bit more. I said that the artists discovered, if you want, these 17 patterns of symmetry that exist in two-dimensional space without knowing any mathematics. The Russian crystallographer Fedorov classified these 17 groups, and there was actually a woman astronomer who connected these two things. And what for me that is striking is that there may be rules and patterns which we are not aware of, but we have to be constrained by and we live by. And so art itself, even if we are not aware of it, even if in that moment you are creating, we are still dancing that dance. There is some pattern to that dance.
Yeah.
And in all humility, we may see only a little piece of that pattern, but the fact that such a pattern exists, I think is motivating. I don't know how many of you have read Somerset Maugham's of Human Bondage. There is this, it's going off topic, but there's this little carpet that an old artist gives to a young artist to just stare at and think about, and to discover some pattern or symmetry in it. I've always been struck by that. We are surrounded by all these patterns, and we are seeking something. In science, we are seeking the one pattern that explains it all, right? But the very existence of such patterns is interesting. The world is not random.
Important to add is, of course, it's kind of say in a set of super golden rules. Because like the Alhambra, you will notice the tiles, the walls, they're so fascinating to look at. Not only because of the pattern, but because every little tile was handmade, meaning they're all a little off of being perfect. So they're not perfect, and that's why they're interesting. I've seen once a presentation also of a mathematician analyzing the Alhambra tilings and redoing them by computer. Well, they were plain dead.
Well, the question is there a deeper pattern? That there's a superficial pattern of the space groups?
Yeah.
I think it's a very good example is in music. So if you take sheet music and you try to get a computer to play it, it sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And the reason somebody studied it, they found out, there was a PhD thesis I read when I was in that lab, was that musicians will introduce small jitter inside.
Will you allow me if I say something wrong? I think the idea is that we're talking about art that makes us feel good, that brings us home, that centers us. But there are other kinds of art. There's art that decenters us, that challenges us, that keeps us off base, and these artists are expressing that also. Okay?
Misschien aan de verstand nog.
The artist is a conduit for human experience and one who distills and presents it. And it could be all kinds of human experience then.
But it's not necessarily something we want to live with.
No,
correct.
That's exactly, you're absolutely right. And what we discuss is emphasize, to discuss what kind of music you like to have at home or what kind of art you would like to have at home on purpose to make a separation from other art. But it doesn't mean that that kind of art which maybe is disrupting or something should not exist. Clearly, that's a whole different discussion. It's the same with music or with experimental theater. It would be ridiculous to say, because it doesn't fit in my home, it should not exist.
Yeah.
But I'm very interested in the reason why somebody else likes a work of art. And the basic criterion to take that home, because it's a very different context, then people think very differently. And when they are confronted with the question, is this art or is this not art?
So is that because the rhythms or the patterns in the art are pleasing? Or is it because the artist has broken through the patterns and perhaps the patterns...
The artist has captured something, a little more true than a superficial pattern and is able to communicate that truth to the viewer. My thesis would be like Frey, that there is biological reality to this, that where we really resonate. Is that there is this notion that I come back to my theme of the universal. The fact that you can communicate with your audience means that there's something shared, even though we're born differently and we grow up differently. What is that? Is that cultural? Is that genetic? Is that something we analyze? These are secondary questions. But the primary observation is there's something we share. We clearly share our biology and our experiences and our species endowments, even though we may not be aware of it. The fact that we share it, I think, enables.